Welcome, and as always, thank you so much for being a part of Untapped. For this presentation, I want to talk about how we can use AI to improve our learning, memory, comprehension, and executive function skills. AI is hotly debated right now in education. A lot of teachers and parents think that it's primarily used just for cheating, and to be honest, many of our students use it for such. We use it to write our papers and get around assignments and hard decision-making skills. But I want to show you ways which we can use AI to deepen our learning and comprehension, and especially for those of us who think differently. So let's jump in. Before I start, I think it's important to mention that I do not have any tech or coding background. Everything I will be showing you tonight does not involve any coding or any computer science background. Just like many of the students that come to Untapped, school was not built for me or for how I learned. So I had to figure out how to adapt materials to my learning style, and AI can be tremendously helpful with that. Also, it allows you to double down on your learning strengths. I know my auditory comprehension is much better than if I read, and so I can use AI to adapt materials for that. And so I want to show you how to do that as well. And then we are not using AI for shortcutting, for cheating, or anything like that at Untapped, and that's none of what I'm going to show you tonight. We're showing you how to deepen your learning and improve your problem solving and executive function skills. So first, before we start that, let's talk about how we learn, because whether we use technology or not, the same evidence-based strategies apply. We spoke about this a bit ago, but there's several ways we can study and learn. The first one is through spaced repetition. The brain is consistently trying to cut out information that it does not view as important. So if we want to remember material for a test or for a quiz, we have to somehow tag that information as being important. One of the ways we can do this is through spaced repetition. So if we're studying vocab words, let's say for a Spanish vocabulary test on Friday, studying those words for 10 to 20 minutes on Monday, 10 to 20 minutes on Tuesday, same on Wednesday, same on Thursday, well, that's much more likely to go to our long-term memory versus trying to cram and study for several hours the night before. You spend less time studying and you're more likely to remember them. The next way we learn is through active recall. One of the core mistakes that we see students make is before a test, they just reread their notes over and over. Well, on a test, it's required that you take the information and you actively recall it and manipulate or use the information in some way. So an example of this is you may have to take the information and use it to write an essay, or you may have to take the information and compare it against other information in a multiple choice or true false test. You have to actively recall and manipulate the information to do well on tests and not just reread it over and over. The other way we remember things and get information to our long-term memory is connecting it to existing information or to prior knowledge we have. This helps us get that emotional tag, so we're much more likely to remember the information. One that most students know well is through quizzing, whether it's, quizzing themselves or teaching the information or quizzing the information to other people. If you can teach the information to a parent or a peer and they can ask follow-up questions and you can answer them, well, that means you deeply understand the information. These are the principles and the ways that we learn, and we're going to keep revisiting this. So going back to those strategies, one of the cool things about AI is that no matter what the information is, we can personalize it to us. Let's say we enjoy video games, or we're passionate about our role in the band, or we love being a drummer. Whatever it is, we can take information from school, Spanish vocab, or vocab for a biology test, which I'll show you later, and we can take that information and we can make it relevant to us through AI. This improves engagement with our students, it improves attention, and we're much more likely to remember the information. One of the things that I love about AI is that it gives us immediate feedback loops, which we know is really good for students with executive function challenges. And it does it in a way that doesn't feel like we're being judged. There's a recent study that came out of Harvard that showed students at Harvard were hesitant to engage with tutors on campus because they felt like they were at such a prestigious school, and they didn't feel that way with AI. They were much more willing to ask it any type of question because they didn't feel that judgment. So that's a great thing as well. And we know students, especially these executive function deficits, they thrive off quick feedback loops where traditional schooling does not have that. And next, we can adapt the materials for different learning styles, and I'll show you how to use that as well. And then probably the best thing that AI is working for students right now is taking lots of information, so lots of information from your classes, and making it much more structured and simple. I know one of our core struggles with executive function skills is organization and prioritization, and AI can be helpful for that. Also, it serves as a learning partner that's available 24/7. It's not as good as an in-person tutor yet, or a coach, or a mentor, a therapist, or even a parent, but it's available 24/7 in case you get stuck. So let's look at the tools we're going to talk about tonight. I try to keep this as mainstream as possible, but some of these tools may be new to you. So there's chat-based tools, and the most common one by far is ChatGPT. I'm going to do all the demonstrations tonight using ChatGPT just because that is the one that most people know. There's also one called Claude, which I highly recommend. I think it works great, and its EQ, or its emotional intelligence, I feel is very high, and I use it a lot for questions like that. And then there's Google Gemini, especially if you use Gmail and you're looking for help with writing an email to a teacher that's respectful or a professor. Gemini integrates with a lot of Gmail and common Google apps that our students are using right now. These chat-based tools are best for explaining big concepts in a more simple way. For some reason, they got lost in class. It can take a lot of the materials from class and it can boil them down into something that feels more manageable and understandable for them. It's also great for teachers or professors who may not give follow-up practice questions or study guides before a test. You can upload your tools into there and it can give you practice test questions. And then I love it for brainstorming. It's very common for me, and even on this presentation, I wrote in here everything that I wanted to cover in the presentation, and then it brainstormed new ideas for me and how to get that across to families, and it helped me organize it. So let's look at how to use some of these chat tools right now, and let's give one example. Here's an example of how I use ChatGPT along with notes with a student to help them understand the concepts deeper. So this is very similar to what a real deck looks like for a professor at a university. Sometimes they don't put a lot of time into design, which is understandable, but this is what the notes are for, I think it was like a couple weeks of classes. So you can see they have the notes, they have a few of their screenshots from class, and this is the notes they provided to their students. This can be dry sometimes, but what we can do is we can PDF this and upload it into ChatGPT. If we're struggling with something, in this student's case, they were struggling with the concept of opportunity cost. Well, we can have ChatGPT go through all of the notes and figure out a way to explain it to us in a way that we understand. So I uploaded the notes and I gave it directions. As you can see, it went in through the entire deck and it pulled out the opportunity cost notes, and then it gives it to me in a way that I can understand. And then it gives me scenarios which are helpful. So this is a great way for our students to learn and not struggle with this monotony, especially if there is something like ADHD. But let's say this still didn't land. I'm still not understanding opportunity cost. If you go back to what we talked about initially about how we learn, one of the best things we can do is relate it to something that we already know or something that we're interested in. So using these notes, please explain it to me in video games, i.e. Super Mario Brothers, and give that example. If I relate to something I'm already interested in, I have a better chance at understanding economics and this example. So here it lays out for me, I could spend time playing Mario Brothers, or I could do something else. I could study for this exam, hang out with friends, and it walks me through opportunity costs in a way that's relevant to me. Great teachers have always done this, but AI can individualize it, so I have a much better opportunity at learning the content deeper. Our college students that are doing well right now and our high school students have understood how they can make the content relevant to them, and AI is a great tool to use this for. Now let's look at voice tools with AI that can help us learn deeper. In my opinion, voice is the most underused AI that can really help our students. So here are examples that we've used voice for. The first one, as I spoke about before, is reteaching. One of the things that you can do, especially if your student is self-conscious, is use ChatGPT voice or a different voice tool to teach the subject or material back to the AI and then have it ask you follow-up questions or ask for gaps in your learning. I do this all the time with students, and it's a great way for them to not get embarrassed or defensive and practice reteaching the material to see if they know it. The other thing we use it for is talking through challenging concepts. So if I'm trying to learn a very high level concept, something like the psychology of ADHD, I try to talk through it and have it ask me follow-up questions. And again, I use that to figure out gaps in my learning. I also used it for practicing this presentation and even building this presentation. I built this presentation in my car after dropping my daughter off at school the other day. I had it interview me. I gave it a role. I said, you're an investigative reporter, and interview me about how I use AI with students to build executive function skills and deepen learning. And it interviewed me like I was a reporter. At the end of the conversation, I had it repeat what it found to be the most interesting parts of the conversation. And then I had it build an outline for a presentation based on the interesting parts of the conversation. This was much quicker for me because I was able to do it in the car while I was driving, and I was able to outline my scattered thoughts for me. We also use it a lot for advocating, especially with professors, teachers, and asking for accommodations. Having it role play again where it's the professor and you have to go and ask it for extra time, that's an overwhelming situation, and often it doesn't come off clear, kind, and not entitled. And so we have it role play that with AI, and that helps students a lot. Also for older students, challenging conversations with friends and roommates, we found that to be helpful as well. And then as a parent, so often we're trying to help our students with homework, and it was taught different than how we learned it. So we have it teach it to us or teach it to there and ask for gaps. And then I use it a lot of times with my daughter just to help me guide my thinking. When something's off, and if I can't see my therapist or something that week, I just ask it a few questions and see what comes back. It's never going to be as good as a real person or real help, but it's a great way for me to help guide my scattered thinking so I can be as helpful as possible. Like I said, one of the things I love ChatGPT voice for is that we can interact in a way that's quicker, and it allows us to practice whether it's hard conversations, challenging situations which we feel anxious for, and have a non-judgmental person kind of mirroring us. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. So if I go to ChatGPT, either on my computer or on my phone, and this is on my computer obviously, but you press on this button right here. It looks the same on your phone, and I'm going to show you how this works quickly. Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Doing well. I have to give a big presentation to my language arts class. It is my final project, and it's about a 20-minute presentation. Would you listen to the presentation and then give me feedback for how I did?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to listen and give you feedback. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and start.
So you can see that then I would start giving my presentation, and the voice would give me feedback based on how I did, my tone, if I went too fast, too slow, the content, and it's a great way for many of our students to practice. That's ChatGPT voice. Another very underutilized AI tool is something called Notebook LM. Why Notebook LM is so helpful for executive function skills is because it's needle in a haystack technology. What that means is if you type something into a ChatGPT or a Google Gemini, it's pulling from its entire training system, or basically the entire internet. And so you can get a lot of junk in there. What's great about Notebook LM is that it only pulls from the sources that you upload. So what I do every single week is I upload the newest research in ADHD that came out that week. There's a lot that's coming out weekly, so I'll upload the 5 to 10 new research studies, and then I use that to ask it questions or have it make me a custom podcast based only on the research that I uploaded. So again, that's helpful. For our students, it's a great way to study for tests because we can use this active recall, which we know is so helpful. You can have it make you custom study guides or have it make you frequently asked questions, and you can interact with the material from just that study guide, and again, not the entire internet. And so we talk about active recall. This is the first tool that we send students to is Notebook LM. And again, you're interacting with the material, which is going to help you improve your long-term memory. I could not recommend the podcast feature highly enough. Finally, for big research projects, if you have a lot of materials, let's say you have to cite something in one of your research papers, well, you can pick it out quickly instead of looking back through all these pages of research, and frustration gets high. And we know our students struggle with monotonous tasks. You can get to the part of the research paper, the part of the study, the part of whatever very quickly while reducing frustration. Notebook LM happens to be my favorite AI tool for high school and college students. It's very different than ChatGPT because it only pulls from documents that you upload. So you're not getting a lot of junk pulling from the entire internet. You're just getting what you upload. You just Google Notebook LM, and it actually happens to be a part of Google, but you create a new notebook. And going back to our initial example of the macroeconomics class the student was struggling with, I created this notebook in advance. I uploaded the deck that I showed earlier. And so you can add any sources here, and Notebook LM is only going to pull from here. The cool thing about it is that once you upload it, you can have it create you a study guide. And this is what that would look like. It gives commonly asked questions and then has an answer key for you. Next, it gives frequently asked questions that it goes through and knows what a lot of people ask questions about. And then it can give you a briefing doc. Again, this is active learning. This is how we get material from short-term to long-term memory. I can also ask it any question I need, like what is opportunity cost? And it will not pull from the entire internet. Again, it will just pull from that document, and it shows you exactly where it gets it from that document. So you could click on this and it will take you to the exact moment in that document which it spoke about opportunity cost and use the same words. Finally, my favorite part, and this takes about 10 minutes the first time you do it, but when you have your sources, you can click on Create Me an Audio Overview, and then it will create a custom podcast just for you about the content that you've uploaded. This is a great idea for auditory learners to learn a lot of information quickly. Personally, I use it I download a lot of new ADHD studies since there's many new ones coming out. And to continue being an expert, it would take me too long to read all the studies, but I'll upload, let's say, 5 to 10 new ADHD studies into here. I'll say create a podcast, and on my morning walk, I listen to a 10 to 15 minute podcast about that. So this is a great tool for learners that learn in a different way. It's a great tool for active learning. I highly recommend Notebook LM. So those are the tools that we use. I mentioned a lot of these strategies while talking about the tools, but let's talk about AI can improve your learning and your productivity. We've talked about how to study before. So things like spaced recall, active recall. Well, the brain also craves novelty. Sometimes novelty it helps us with memory. And so I know a lot of students that we work with really enjoy stories. And when they can make stories out of the content, well, they're much more likely to remember it, especially when the story relates to them. So I'll show you how to do this in a bit, but you can use AI to create stories, to create visual representations. The visuals aren't great yet, but they'll get there soon. And then custom examples. I'll show this in a second, but if you like video games, you can have whatever materials you're studying, have it relate back to video games. Have it relate to a sport that you like, a movie that you love. Whatever you're into, AI can help you find a way to make the content relevant to you, and that helps with learning. I'll show this in a second, but if you have to memorize 10 words for biology and maybe biology is not something that interests you, make it relate to you. Make a story out of it. Make song lyrics out of it, and AI can be helpful with this, and our students just love it. Here are other ways that I haven't spoken to which AI can help us become better studiers. The first one is if your teacher did not give you a study guide, uploading the materials, all your notes needed for the test, and then have it give you practice questions. And again, if the questions aren't right the first time, give it feedback like it's another human or an intern or a personal assistant, and say something like, these were the right type of questions because I think the teacher will focus more on this path. But it can be a great way to quickly generate questions for you. The one that's big for our students is that they get immediate feedback. We know students with executive function deficits and specifically ADHD struggle with these longer feedback loops. And the quicker you can give them feedback, the more likely they are to engage in the studying in the material. That's why a lot of our students are so attracted to video games, is because you press a button and something happens quickly. There's quick feedback loops which activate our dopamine systems. AI can help you with these quick feedback loops. Again, it can identify gaps in your knowledge, which a lot of times with our metacognition skills and our self-assessment, we're not sure where these gaps are. And then I showed you how to create custom quizzes with Notebook LM. But using all of these strategies together, you can build out a great interactive way and a way that our students enjoy in studying for a test. Another great way to improve our memory and to make information stick is to create stories or songs or different ways of increasing novelty to help us remember things. So here's an example of something I did with a high school student a little bit back, and they had 10 biology vocab words to learn. So protein, amino acid, lipids, and you can see going down. And this was hard for them to learn and they just found it dry. So I'm asking ChatGPT, I'm saying, I have a biology test in a few days and I need help studying. Please create a story that will help me remember them. And then this student loved volleyball volleyball, so relate it to volleyball. Let's see what it comes up with. All right, so what it came up with was, it talks about before the big match, they have to eat carbohydrates and relates it to different carbohydrates they would eat. And then it goes through protein and lipids, and then it relates different parts of the court, like the court boundaries, the cell membrane. And it just really does a nice job creating a story. And this worked really well for this student. Maybe a song works better for you. Well, we can have it create song lyrics. Whatever works and sticks for your student's brain, we can use AI to make the information highly personal. The student actually enjoyed studying it because it was about volleyball, and it landed. They did very well on this test. That's another example of how to make information stick and how to make it personal. The next challenge which AI can help us with is boosting our productivity and decreasing our procrastination. A lot of frustration right now is coming up for students who are struggling with procrastination, and parents want them to be more productive and have more free time. So how can we use AI to do that? The first one, and I'll show an example of this in a second, is to break complex and overwhelming tasks into manageable steps. There's a lot of research coming out about procrastination, and a piece of it is this emotional overwhelm. When the task feels really big, well, we have a hard time getting started on it. So we can break that task into manageable small pieces, and that helps get us started and get momentum. Next, I know I struggle with this, especially during high stress times like a final exam week, is you have all these assignments and everything feels important. And so brain dumping all of your tasks and assignments out, or uploading the syllabuses and having it help you prioritize which one should I focus on first, which one will give me the biggest bang for our buck, which one is worth the most points without going back through everything and using all this time. But it helps me a lot with prioritization. And then you can, again, use it to get help when you're stuck. So when you're having a hard time with a difficult concept, you can backwards plan, and it can show you how to do the problem, and you can get unstuck very quickly without needing a parent, a mentor, a teacher, a tutor to jump in. And that keeps you productive and keeps the momentum going. We're not constantly stopping and starting. And then finally, I explained this a little bit in Notebook LM. What really slows productivity down for a lot of our older students is when you have a lot of materials to use for a presentation, for a research paper. We get stuck when we're constantly having to look back in all these materials and find what we need next, and AI can help you organize that. I'm going to show you an example right now of how to use AI for cleaning our room, which is a surprisingly overwhelming task for a lot of our students, how to get more productive and started with it. We know one of the biggest challenges right now is procrastination. Procrastination is highly emotional. When we feel overwhelmed by something, it's less likely that we get started. We can use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini here, but a great lesser known tool is something called Goblin Tools. And Goblin Tools is meant just to break down big complex tasks for students that get overwhelmed. So you can see right here, there's these peppers on the side. The more peppers that you choose, the more it will break down the task for you. Let's break down a task that's getting a lot of our students stuck. And that's, I need to clean my room. So there's old food on my desk, there's clothes on the floor, I have dirty sheets. Where do I even start? I'm not going to have it break it down too far because for me that doesn't work well, but for some students it may. But you can just ask it and it'll break down this task for you. And so let's see what it does. You can see that it breaks this task down into small, manageable steps that we can check off along the way. So step 1, start by gathering any trash in the room, throw it away. Step 2, we're going to work on the food. Step 3, and it just breaks down this big, overwhelming task of cleaning my room into small steps. As a parent, you could say, you just need to complete the first 4 steps and then we'll work on the other ones later. And if they get stuck along the way, we can break these tasks down into smaller, manageable steps as well. Goblin Tools is a great tool for many students that struggle with overwhelm and it feels like the task is too big. Highly recommend this one as well. Something I've spoken a lot about before is that our students who think differently, the ones who understand how they learn, those are the ones who just crush it later on in life. When you understand how you learn, how you acquire information, how you get started, and you develop these metacognition skills, when you pair that with thinking differently, well, we see our kids just take off, and that's exactly what the world is looking for. So let's look at how we can use AI to help us improve these self-assessment and metacognition skills. This is one that I would have used all the time in college. I can't tell you the amount of frustration that would come up when I would bust my tail on a paper and think that I included everything from the rubric. And maybe I missed 1 out of 4 things I was supposed to do on a presentation or on a paper, and I would get a C- on it, even when it was a good product, because I just missed one piece. So after a student finishes a presentation or a paper, downloading that, uploading that into an AI, and then uploading a rubric and saying, did I get every piece of this assignment, is incredibly helpful. Again, it helps with self-assessment. If we're consistently missing a piece of a project, well, that's great information for us to have. After a test goes well, having it generate reflection questions for us that we can answer is something we've seen help a lot of older students out with as well. So let's say they get a B+ on a stats test and they're excited. We can have AI help us generate questions about our process. Things like, how many days in advance did we start studying? Did we go to office hours? When we were studying, was it a loud, busy coffee shop environment, or was it a quiet library type place? And so having it generate questions for us to answer after a few of these tests, we'll start to see patterns, and that really helps with our metacognition and our understanding how we learn. And then it's objective. It doesn't have these preconceived opinions of us. So over time, it can identify our strengths and where we need to grow. I know I use ChatGPT with this. One of the most insightful questions I can ask it after interacting with it, daily for about a year now. I'll ask it things like, where are my blind spots? What am I missing? And where am I growing? And it'll give me answers that are very insightful. And so it's a great way to help increase our metacognition as well. I spoke about it before, but let's talk about how to use AI to advocate. I spoke about this during voice mode, but interacting and role playing is helpful, but also having it help you draft and refine emails for things like needing extra time on accommodations. Often we send emails where we don't understand what the tone comes off like, and maybe it's not formatted correctly or something's just off. And so we coach all of our students once they write their email to make sure it has the tone and all the contents needed to be a good advocating email. So we use it for that all the time. And then over time, this develops confidence and our students know how to appropriately self-advocate. And again, AI is not judgmental. So it gives us low pressure practice and way to do so. And then another piece of it we use as well is preparation for hard conversations with people, but preparations for intimidating academic discussions. A lot of our students have to come prepared, especially when they get older, for things like Socratic seminars after reading an article, and they have to come talk about it in front of the class and contribute 1 or 2 comments. We have our students role play that and practice that with either voice mode or ChatGPT so they can make sure they have a comment prepared and anxiety stays lower. So that is what we use that for advocating as well. And then I can share an example of how to ask a teacher for an extension on a project. Again, you can see an example below, which ChatGPT laid out what was good about it and then what needed more improvements. Like I said, here's an actual example of how we've used a ChatGPT to help us with our writing and advocating through email, because we don't want things to be misconstrued. So you can see that I just put in an email and I was pretty short with it, asking for an extension. And I asked AI, here's what I'm trying to do. Would you make sure the tone is clear and respectful? And then it gives me something when I go through it that is a much more clean and clear way to advocate, and something that's, well laid out, easy to understand. And our students have really enjoyed the advocating piece of AI because it's less anxiety provoking and they're not wondering how it's going to be received by their teacher. For people who are into technology, I'm sure a lot of this was helpful and you already knew, and some of it hopefully sparked some new ideas for you. But for some of us who are overwhelmed by technology, one of the most important things we can do is do our best to learn about these AI tools alongside our students. Again, AI is a weird technology, which we expect a lot of our students, once they leave their education, to be comfortable with, but a lot of us view it as cheating within education. And so we're in a weird conflicting time where it's cheating until you get your degree, and then we expect you have it. Employers are looking for it. So learning alongside your student with these AI tools, I think it's great modeling, showing how much the world is changing. And I think it's going to be helpful for them to see that you're struggling with it just like everybody else is. Another piece of modeling or a conversation to have is using AI in a helpful way and not in a way that does everything for you. I know one of the biggest things that a lot of us behind the scenes at Untapped are worried about is that we believe, similar to post-COVID, when there was a social anxiety crisis, when students were locked in their rooms, essentially, or locked in their homes for a year to 2 years, a lot of students had a lot of anxiety going back to school and being put in these social environments without practice. And we're still in this anxiety crisis right now, partially due to that. Well, a lot of us believe that students are becoming overly reliant on AI, and we're going to have a problem-solving crisis in a few years. Our students are maybe overly reliant on AI and aren't developing these problem-solving, critical thinking skills that they're going to need in the workforce. And we see this challenge coming. So how parents can help is helping their students understand how to use AI in a positive way to deepen their learning and not becoming overly reliant on it so we don't hinder these critical thinking skills. And then, like anything else, just having clear expectations. What do we use it for? What's cheating? What's not? It's pretty gray, but having as clear as expectations as possible. Something like, we can use AI in this house to help us create an outline, but when we write the paper, we're going to write it because we need to learn how to write. So whatever those expectations are for you and your family, getting clear on those is helpful. And as always, process over product. Focusing on the process of our learning, meaning using AI to learn, versus the overall grade. Because that's another mental trap we're getting stuck in right now is kids who are overly reliant on AI. A lot of them that we see are actually doing very well and their grades are high, but their process is not great. And that's going to come back to bite us later on in a few years. So how do we increase and improve our process over time, knowing that the product will come and not getting solely focused on that right now? If you have any questions on this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is right here. As always, thank you so much for being a part of Untapped. I hope this gave you a few ideas, and this is for many of you, I hope it's just an idea generator because there's infinite uses for this thing, and hopefully I sparked a few ideas. Thank you again for everything, and I hope to talk soon.